source on there.
Going classes is always easier.
It only has one review on Wiki Data. I found it by accident. No, it was.
As I get older,
It used to work a second ago.
Philosophical tools for technological culture.
yeah, give yourself a little
Yes.
He's also got fragments of correspondence and lessons from He really clearly is.
Yeah. I mean, this book I'm reading, I don't know if it's the best of his, but I like the title.
Yeah, no, it's great.
It's 2001, but it's actually held up pretty well. It's kind of interesting to see his predictions. They weren't super strong.
Did you find a connector, or it's the mini display port to HDMI connector? Do you have that one? Do you have the
For an Apple,
for Apple? Yeah.
I'll check.
Okay, you know,
Yeah, it'll be this one to the
also
tiny.
gave us good lecture about it.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, they're
Alright, can you check?
Okay, you know your stuff.
One of the things I find fascinating here is the ability to edit documents. Which is another way of saying it's like,
Yeah.
they clearly work out clearly desktop systems.
Because we prepared to go one by one after we can't wait for those to understand who's reporting well.
No, that's kind of a reasonable assumption.
If you're the reporter, go to John.
Last time was so much more creative.
His name.
Okay.
On balance.
All right. Are you all excited about the wrap up? Woo! All right. If you're one of the rapporteurs, it would be amazing if you could check in quickly with Jonathan, so he has you in the list, so that we can very quickly go through the list. Would be amazing.
Could we just write it on the spreadsheet for Jonathan?
Unfortunately, he's the only one who can edit it at the
Why
moment.
don't they just say their name when they start?
Yeah.
When they come up to start.
We'll just have people. People will need to line up because we have a very long list and very tight constraints. So it would be great to have already an idea of who's presenting. For instance.
Okay, let's just go quick. Who's talk for Group 1B? Start saying who your reporters are.
So who is the reporter for centralized citation management?
No one?
So my suggestion is that you go to Jonathan and you let him know your name so that we can start. Now.
Yesterday, but maybe that was something.
Thank you.
Okay, yes, yeah.
I'm Mac. M-A-H.
Because otherwise it's going to spend like 15 minutes just one.
Okay.
And then Lydia just calls them out by name while they start.
For which one?
You can explain it.
Disambiguation.
Okay, in the meantime, Rachel is gonna be our amazing timekeeper. She will tell you when you're...
All right, change of plans. We're going to open up that document so that anyone can edit directly. Sounds obvious. And we'll lock it down again. We're going to try and keep it clean because it's going to be our record of the actual program. So please don't vandalize it. I'll change the permissions, allow everybody to add their names so we can get started. Yes.
All right, so back to Rachel. She's gonna be our amazing timekeeper. Keep your report short. You have up to 5 minutes, and Rachel will be bugging you if you're going over that. All right. Do we have our first reporter?
That's me.
That is you.
Yeah.
Then, Dario, the stage is yours.
All right. Okay. All right. So, hi everybody. Our session was about ways to improve Citoid to make it more useful and achieve this vision of creating the sum of all citations for human knowledge. So pretty ambitious goal, and we identified a number of directions in which Citoid can be improved. The first one is an issue of cross-integrations. So we discussed a lot the question of whether Citoid could directly integrate with Wiki Data, specifically by seeding Wiki Data with content whenever a new citation is added across Wikimedia projects. And it turns out there are actually many technical and social problems with this that we discussed extensively. And we also discussed the issue of how this cross-integration can help us identify sources that have already been used by editors, and maybe use Citoid to help discover these sources and make it slightly more usable to rediscover and reuse the citations. The discoverability aspect is related to this, and probably going to skip on that one briefly for the sake of time. The main issue we focused on, and that's the one that got most attention during the session, is the issue of data quality. We heard from Andrew and Rob all the pain points in the case of news metadata, and we discussed ways in which we can collect feedback about what Citoid is doing wrong, and how we can help improve it. And possible ways to improve it include, for example, collecting data on incorrect metadata generated by Citoid, and using this data to prioritize the kind of translators that need to be fixed upstream at the Zotero level. We also discussed ways in which partnerships can help with the data quality problem. And in particular, there are two possible directions to explore. One is to basically work with content publishers to make sure that they adhere to some standards on how they present their metadata to make it easier for Zotero and Citoid to script this data consistently. And we also discuss ways in which we can partner directly with Zotero to use editor feedback on improving translators. There's a second possible venue for partnerships, and that's related to not so much addressing data quality issues, but enriching the data that Citoid is currently generating. Every time there's a transformation from a source to the output of Citoid, there's a loss of data. And so the question is, how can we partner with different providers? One example is the Open Library, as opposed to OCLC, for example, to provide richer data about fully available text of a book. Or in some cases, we would like to look up whether a paper is available under open access or not. So we think there are possibilities not just to address data quality, but also to generate much better, richer properties stored with the output of Citoid. And take a look at the entire Etherpad if you're curious about what we discussed. Thank you.
All right, session 1B. Mary. Hello. I don't need to plug it in, I just need to set it down. Okay, so the our session was on how does centralized citation management benefit the Wikimedia wikis? What are the benefits of storing bibliographic metadata for all Wikipedia projects in Wiki Data? As you can imagine, we had a very interesting and full-ranging conversation. But in summary, we decided to stick to the task at hand, which was to talk about benefits. And there are quite a few benefits, both for editors of multiple Wikimedia projects across all languages,
as well as readers of Wikipedia and other projects, publishers, libraries, but that there are really a distinct set of benefits and values for each of those groups, and we should really step back from the user perspective and look at what those particular benefits are and then articulate those out to individual communities. So for example, within the Wikipedia community, there is surprisingly, not in this room but elsewhere, quite a bit of resistance to having a centralized, they're articulated in various talk pages and project pages, there are articulated reasons that people would be against this. So kind of understanding and taking on board what those objections are, and then clearly articulating kind of counter arguments to why this is really in their interest and in the interest of readers would be really important. So arguments for benefit should be made for each community differently, and also with attendance to what objections might be for those. There's a real, we think that there's a real opportunity for external identifiers. The use of external identifiers really helps to knit Wiki Data and the Wikicite effort into the larger community, into the outside world of scholarly literature, publishing, etc. And we should really be attendant to what those benefits are. We don't think in articulating the benefits we need to have a very we need to, at this point, have a very clearly defined data model, or have made specific decisions about the database in order to articulate the benefits. We found ourselves getting quite caught up in how this is all going to work, and is this going to be in Wiki Data, or is it going to be someplace else? But we shouldn't get caught up in that. But eventually we do need to define what our terms mean in particular, and we think that in order to have conversations with ourselves, with the external community, that we do need to have an improved set of terms or a glossary of terms to keep ourselves on the same page, and also to be able to point other people towards our particular terminology. So in particular, we were getting kind of hung up on what's the difference between citation and what's the difference between a reference and a citation. And so we think a glossary would help us be more concrete in the ways that we're speaking about things and literally keep us on the same page. And the next steps, we think bullet points, arguments could be worked out during the hackathon and then put onto Meta. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who's next?
You can use this one in this way.
Okay.
No, it's fine.
It's fine. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Mahmoud from session 1C, representing a dozen of us or so. So our job was to check in on, do a little fact-finding on, and present to you how current sources on Wiki Data are being used as citations within other wiki projects. So, first we wanted to understand what worked, so we went on a little fact-finding mission, and basically, that was a little bit tough at first, and there was a surprising amount of, maybe just among our small group, just lack of knowledge of where Wikidata was already being used. But we did find a few successful examples. So, French Wikipedia uses something like module cite for books. They call it bibliography or something like that. I shouldn't be doing French accents. All right. We also have a Wiki Project academic articles that has a bot and it counts citations per journal. So really, we ended up sort of forking into two camps within our group. One camp was big on books. The other one was big on journals. No value judgments, but it was basically about which is slightly lower hanging fruit. Okay, so what we found was that we're still kind of at that bootstrapping phase for this particular effort of doing citations with Wikidata. That we have, basically we have to make a case to wiki editors still, and there are three areas where we can continue to grow, sort of like a three-part chicken and egg type problem. So we, one, can sweeten the data. So there are certainly people here that want to add more bibliographical data to Wikidata, and then that'll entice the wiki community to come get access to that. But we also need more powerful transclusion tools to improve the native experience for Wikipedia authors. So the major concern among authors, based on some user experience testing, is that they like the transparency of classic citations. And if you just have an ID in there, that's a little bit opaque. So we need a JavaScript tool, and there was a JavaScript effort to do this, and I think they're soliciting for more JavaScript effort to basically have a better editor that will pop up some information about stuff that's transcluded from Wikidata. And finally, outreach and marketing. So, we have other morning sessions that make a case for a central citation database, and basically presenting these popular use cases. So, our action items are, one, maybe we should have basically have a bot or something like that that's looking at edits as they come through, and actually just do a regex for Q and P and a series of numbers, and maybe see if people are just kind of trying out Wikidata. Two, for our journal fans, we have a Russian template that is great for scientific articles. It's rather new, and so basically translating that to English Wikipedia and just starting to use that. One idea there is that rather than doing it for a particular Wikipedia article and changing all the references to use Wikidata, instead take the opposite approach. Look at one citation, maybe using Aaron Halfacker's database when that's ready. Choose one citation and change it across many, many Wikipedia articles so people can see the network effect of the centralization of citation data. So there's a structure of DNA article that we think would be quite good, and there's the Wikidata item for that. And then we also have the French success story of using it for books on about 200 articles, so we can elaborate book items in Wikidata.
1 minute?
Sure. And then we have Huck Finn and Pride and Prejudice as a couple of classic examples. So. Yeah, I think that we have a pretty good route forward, and I think everyone was pretty confident in the room that we'll see a doubling, if not more, of citation usage on Wikipedia through Wikidata. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Jonathan, can you read the name of the next speaker? Thank you.
Next up, we have Mohammed El.
Hi. I am from session 1D or D1 about what can go wrong with Wikicite. We discussed that from 4 perspectives, technical and social and legal and long-term preservation issues. Some of them are Wikicite issue, and others are Wikibase in general. If we want to talk about technical issues, we can discuss it. We discussed about how it can be scalable, and it can handle a high demand for the endpoint of Sparkle. Is it can it handle that or not, and the fragmentation and how we can contribute to code and models and content, and also how we can can make decisions. We include the risks of social. Okay, thank you. We may result in loss of trust and inequality because of the database continues to develop without a consciousness, and the policy also. And some people will begin to lose the trust because their work may be lost, and the database continues to develop unequally. So, and also in fragmented manner. From a legal issues, we we explained we tried to discuss the copywriting, because sometimes the copyright is okay and sometimes are not with some topics as topics. And about the long time preservation, the loss of data is due to some circumstances. It may be not not at the moment, but in a long term can vanish. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Who is next?
Either Finn or Jody.
Finn is coming up.
So this was use cases we discussed, and after some initial talk, we ended up framing the idea in user stories. And these user stories has a particular schema. You write as a role, I want to do something. And there was a particular number of users we identified, a researcher, a service provider, a journalist, a student, librarian, a journal editor, text miner, funder, institution, companies. So there are various ways that these roles can do or use Wikidata. For example, as a researcher, you might go into a sub-role as an author. I want to use Wikidata for bibliographic management, either directly or through your own bibliographic data management, where you want to synchronize against the Wikidata. As a high school student, you might want to get an indication of the quality of the particular reference you're making. Let me see. As a social scientist, you might want to get an overview of the themes. There are, for example, as a service provider, you might want to get an author disambiguation service from Wikidata or from a tool associated with Wikidata. As a journalist, you might also want, like a researcher, want to know which stories of yours are cited on Wikipedia. You want to discover potential biases in the topic you're describing. For example, connection between people. Might be able to use that with Wikidata. As an institution funder, you might want to assess how well the funded research is performing. So, you might want to know how much a paper is cited that is funded by an organization. Yes, some of the low-hanging fruits might be possible to implement in the next few months. Could be some rudimentary service for review, a suggestion for journal editors. So you're a journal editor and want to find a suitable reviewer for a particular paper that is submitted to a journal. Yeah.
We can just.
We're going to be using this one for speakers, and you can use that one, and I'll stay there.
All right, James.
You can use this one. So, are the other... Sorry, where does this actually come from? Multitasking.
From heaven.
Provenance. Provenance.
Is your session 2A?
There we go.
So our session focused on the documentation of data models on Wiki Data, not the actual development of data models. That is a conversation for another day. But of the data models that are in use, how do we document it? So it was kind of more of a meta session. So yes, first we figured out, okay, how does our data model relate to other data models? Because we don't want to exist in our own world, right? We want to also be aware of other data models, but we have to be careful about how we do this. We had the benefit of having, professional ontologists in the room who were cautioning against referring to exact matches because there are technical reasons not to do that, but we could say they're close matches, and this is how we can play nice with the other ontologies without making too extreme a claim. We'll also want to ask, in terms of defining all the data that we should be including in our data model, who are the different people we want to reach out to, and this includes people actually doing citations on Wikimedia projects, as well as people like librarians, people who do this for a living and know what they're talking about. Yes, and other ontologies, we want to see if we're missing anything. We don't have to do exactly what they do, because for all we know, they're wrong or they're otherwise inapplicable to what we do, but we should at least take the other ontologies that exist under advisement. And we want to supplement our external research with just reporting of what Wikidata already does organically. So rather than define a schema from the top down, we run an analysis that, given a class of items on Wikidata, we see what property usage looks like, what qualifier usage looks like, just so we have an idea of what's already being done, and we can address edge cases as they come up, or figure out if we want to standardize around a particular way of doing things. But the idea being, rather than impose something, we just see what's already being done and kind of do that. So then that brings me to the point of what would the actual purpose of the documentation be if we're not prescribing a schema and we're using this automated report. But the role of documentation is more to provide the theory behind the kind of decisions we made and to give some additional context to the way we do things on Wikidata, because it might not appear reasonable for an outsider, or it might not be intuitive. Like, why do we put series ordinals by authors? Well, because the ordering of a list of authors is actually meaningful, and you may not think of doing that, but if there's good documentation saying, yes, this is what we do, here's why, that may make you more likely to do it. And also, as we ingest data from new sources, that may make us want to revisit our schema, come up with new properties, things like that. And also, we want... we also want to emphasize Wikidata as a hub of identifiers, so that we are not only linking between different ontologies, but also different data sets, so that Wikidata is part of a richer structured data ecosystem. So, thank you.
Who's next? Catherine.
Reporting out on the group about Wikicite, what could go wrong? Wait, no, that's not it. Sorry. Constraints, maybe? Quality control.
Yes.
Is this your right?
No.
Or no? Okay.
No.
Which section were?
Quality control.
Can you give me the number of sections? Sorry, they were supposed to
2E.
be ordered.
2E.
2E or not 2E?
2B.
This is 2B.
Not 2B, 2E.
Oh, 2E. Okay.
Yes, this is it. We started from a request for comments that has already been closed about quality in Wikidata, and we went through all of the points in the request for comments to see which ones were applicable to Wikicite. So I guess you can look at that request for comments, and you can look at the Etherpad to see our notes about which ones are relevant for Wikicite. And then we discussed the existing tools and the tools that will be available in the near future for doing anything related to quality on Wikidata. Could you scroll up to the to-dos above? Thank you. Okay, so Andra is going to look at to what extent can we say that subsets of Wikidata are fair data, and there's a link to what fair data is. Aaron is going to make sure that all of the tools stuff that we collected gets into some page in the Wikidata project namespace. Lydia is going to provide the feedback that we created on this request for comments back to the original author of it. And Andra and I are going to share information about how shape expressions could potentially be used for quality control. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next speaker is already coming.
So I was in the infrastructure session, and we were interested in surveying the existing tools for Wikicite and trying to evaluate which ones are needed or need improvement. And the first thing we agreed on was to abstract away from the actual database where we would store the metadata, so library base or Wiki Data or some kind of Cite cache. So we just call this metadata Wikicite items, regardless of where they actually are. And we also chose to abstract away from whether we wanted to migrate all the existing citations to the new system or not. So that just leads us to the actual tools that we need to implement for new citations that are input by editors. Obviously, the first tools that we need to have are being able to look up a citation in the database, so with a sort of input from the user, either by freeform or with already some structured metadata in it. And then if the citation is not found, we need to be able to create it. And that's something we already have some tools for, but they can be improved, of course. Then, once we have these metadata and citation, we want to keep track of the relationship between the two. So for instance, if you have a metadata item in the database, you want to be able to track where it's being used in all the wikis. You also want to keep track of changes on this item to notify them back to the author who input the citation in the first place, because if we change the meaning of the metadata, then the meaning of the citation is going to change. So we want to be able to track that. We also considered the cases where you delete either the citation or the metadata, or you merge it with some other item. So in all these cases, you want maybe bots to change the references in the wikis, or other sort of tools. And of course, we also consider external tools, for instance, on the tools labs with OAuth, to help with some very specific tasks like disambiguation of authors or things like that, really. So it looks a bit complicated, but it's all things that we've done before. It looks a bit like commons, so it's tracking usage of commons across all wikis and things like that. So we didn't find any real hard point. It's just a lot of small use cases that we need to deal with, essentially.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our next speaker is Liz.
You know your session number?
D?
2D. 2D.
Yeah.
The audio.
2D or not 2D? No. That actually is bad because it's not even a good one.
This one, yes. Is it yours?
Yes. So our group, so it's small but feisty, talked about stakeholders, and so we quickly switched to discussions of strategy. It wasn't just let's try and identify every possible stakeholder. It's might there be some stakeholders that we'd want to specifically target for things like partnerships, and who would be good for this? Who would have data that would be useful and would also be motivated to share with us? And so we talked about both government organizations and NGOs, or specifically the MDP, I forgot there's an abbreviation for that, mission-driven publishers. So this would include organizations like the World Health Organization, the OECD, the World Bank, so we were thinking about also the ways that we can encourage them to deposit their data, because then they could learn things about it. So it's like a value proposition. Then if we get one organization involved, we can say, well, also, the World Bank is doing this to get some interest. And as a first step, thinking about the hackathon tomorrow, we talked about extracting citations from Wikipedia from some of these sources, so we could actually see, how many World Health Organization, for example, articles are cited, and to make sure across different languages, because communication is really important, to make sure that the citations in each of the languages of Wikipedia are to articles of that same language. And so just poking around, for example, I saw that for one World Health Organization citation in the French Wikipedia was to an English report. And so we want to be able to standardize that so that anybody reading in that language would be able to immediately read the report, guaranteed. That's it.
Thank you. And Phoebe is next.
Name and number.
To be this time, really to be. To be.
Not to be.
Oh, so not to be. This is short and sweet, you guys, because this was a very small group. Maybe a breakout of a breakout, if you will. It was only SJ and me. But let me tell you something about our source list. It's a disaster, and we need to get it under control. Like right now, we've got scientific reports and articles, scientific publications, and report and article. What are the difference between those things? Nobody knows. So we have to figure out our mapping across different publication types. I don't think we need to predefine everything because there are too many things in the world, but we do need to work on making specialty fields that we can mix and match and remix with to make citations. We also talked about defining a pattern for Wiki Data citations, make it easier to cite things that aren't books and journals. They also talked about this in our friendly next door session. This is important because it's very hard right now in Citoid or in Wikidata to figure out how to cite something that's not a journal or a book. And that's a huge, huge part of the bibliographic universe. We talked a bit about a topic that has not been on the table this year, which is specialty indexing. So if you move beyond just collecting citations and think about using them in the world for discovery, my library and every other library in the world spends tons of money on specialty indexes that get into the contents of citations in different sundry ways. I think that's something to think about for our future, our open future. And lastly, talk to specialty librarians about specialty items. Talk to map librarians about maps. Talk to music librarians about music. Talk to me if you want to know about conference publications, because I think I might be the only person in the entire world that really enjoys conference proceedings and enjoys talking about them. And they're complicated, they're hard, they're important. So that's all. We don't have tons of conclusions, but we have to realize both how complex our universe of sources is, and if it exists, we need to be able to cite it. There will always be edge cases. So, thank you.
Who is next? You.
3A. 3A. Hi, my name is Jonathan Dugan. I was in session 3A. It was also extremely small. It was Daniel Meechin and I. We talked about the coordination of activities within Wikicite, how they're occurring now, and models for how we can coordinate them better in the future. Basically, at this point, there's a small group of people that are each acting independently and pushing forward individual projects that are being loosely coordinated in a non-transparent manner. So essentially, people are sending each other direct messages on Twitter and kind of talking about the way things can work. And we agreed that that was probably not the best way to do it. So we talked about using a website. We already have a website. Well, first off, pull back. The two of us were chatting about possibilities, and so we came up with some ideas that we will write up after. We took some notes on it here, but we want to propose this to the community and get feedback on it about a very simple model where we list projects. We list particular workflows that support those projects in a many-to-many manner, and we list people that are connected to certain projects, and tie each of these projects back to both an overarching mission and a series of tracks that lead to particular outcomes for the community. We discussed a mechanism to put this data on a website and allow a much larger group of people than the few 5 or 6 of us that have organized these conferences, sort of open it up to a larger group of volunteers to help coordinate these activities. We also briefly discussed communities and effective communities. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, we were the group that talked about constraints in Wikidata, and constraints they can be helpful. I mean, for data quality and especially for guiding new users or users like through the complexity of the data model they are dealing with. Well, they can be articles, they can be books, they can be conference proceedings, but they should not be supposed to know everything, like the whole data model, the whole theory behind it. So the idea of creating constraints is the idea to guide them and help them understand or do stuff without actually read it through all the documentation. So, I mean, you have to think about constraints in a way to like suggestions and recommendation towards best practices. At the moment, Wikidata has constraints just from a technical point of view, just at the property level. Like, so you have a property and you have a constraint about the values of that single property. And we understood that there are other entities that created the standards and other practices. So we understood the concept of shape. So we want to be able to define constraints on a set of properties. Not just a constraint on the property value, but on the set of these properties. And so, for example, you can have instance of article, and you have a set of constraints on the properties you can use, how many of these properties, a sort of flow chart of things. Of course, this should be linked to a user interface to help the user actually put the right stuff into that. And so we understood standards like FAIR, like meaning findable, accessible, interoperable, or usable data. And we understood very weird stuff like shackle or shacks, that are standards and languages that can help define these constraints. And so we also discussed about the idea of writing constraints for a class, and then the idea of the inheritance of constraints from the class to instance of the class, or I mean the idea of inheritance of constraints. And yeah, so the idea was finding ways to support quality in a way that's transparent and is usable and helpful for users. Thank you.
Marcel?
Session number?
C3C. Okay, great. So hi, I'm reporting for the group discussing author disambiguation. We have also been a very small group, just 4 of us, but we have some, let's say, claims, some ideas that we like to present, and maybe should be discussed in a broader context anyway, but this is what we came up with. First of all, it's our understanding that publications in Wikidata should have their authors mapped to author items, author, editor, creator, whoever is behind this, for all of the authors. This means also the authors that are not noteworthy enough to have a Wikipedia page or so, but really do the whole stuff for all the authors who worked in this. This, of course, means that there are a lot of items that might clash, might collide. So we need, for a match, we need sufficient evidence that is more than just an author name. So they need some methods employed that use a little more semantic access and a little more site information. It's also available in the metadata, such that the correct item can be identified. What we would suggest is that if you cannot be identified, we should have the courage to just create a new item that's maybe just a singleton, but we don't know if it's the correct entity, but we can merge afterwards when new evidence arises. And I can tell you from the practice, it's very much easier if you're disaggregate authors to merge two profiles than to split messed up profiles. So my advice would be go with separate profiles and merge them later. It's much easier. To support this, it would be an aim to have each Wikidata item to be decorated with at least one or maybe more external IDs. And this is something that's, of course, not always possible, but it should be an aim that we strive for. And the reason behind this is if we have in the metadata the presence of fine IDs like ORCIDs and DOIs and so on, then automated disambiguation is possible. Then we can kind of rely on these IDs in the data set and in the metadata and can find the correct matches. But ORCID is just starting, and this will never address historical publications. So this is a strategy for everything that arises from now to hopefully the next years. But we will also have the standard case of having to disambiguate metadata when there's no strict IDs present. And in this case, in the end, what we can think of is maybe have some tools supporting a human editor. It would be an illusion to think that this is a problem that can be solved by an algorithm in the next year automatically. It's way too complicated. There's far too few information available in these metadata records to have even the most elaborate learning algorithm solve this out. You need the human editor to make the decisions here. But you can, of course, use tools and algorithms to support that editor, to give good advice and to highlight interesting aspects of the matching you want to do. And maybe one day you can frame this even in one of those Wikidata game tools to have this a little bit more gamified and have a lot of volunteers work on this and sorting stuff out. But you should consider this requires a lot of manual work. This cannot be solved by an algorithm. And finally, one point that's quite of importance, of course, try to do some outreach here, and you should think about encouraging partners and external libraries, of course, using the Wikidata item IDs so they can be re-imported to the system, and also at the same time include IDs from the outside world into Wikidata to make this mapping bidirectional.
I'm in 3D. No. Oh, is this D?
Yes.
Oh, you're on a different part of the thing. Sorry, I'm going by this version. Hi, everyone. So we had about a dozen of us talk around the topic of custom UI on top of bibliographic data on Wikidata and whether we want it. No one who turned up to our session confessed to being the person that wrote the original title, so we spent the first bit of it discussing with each other as to what we thought it meant and what it was driving at. And in the end, we ended up deciding yes. In particular, we talked about the need for being focused on users and what use cases we're actually trying to support and prioritizing those. So we talked through a bunch of different potential interfaces, some of which get really exciting around potential long-term use case of paper cluster analysis and saying, hey, you know, if you're citing this paper and this paper might be referenceable for your use case as well, that kind of thing. And that's all cool and wonderful, and I look forward in 2045 to seeing that interface. But right up front, there's a lot of much more hardcore interface work, like, hey, you're trying to create a new reference, and you say John Smith, and here are 84 other John Smiths, and which one did you mean, and are you sure, and do you know what the implications of picking the wrong one are? So that's going to be a lot of fun work, and we initially said we were going to prioritize a list of interfaces once we created it, and then we created it and decided we didn't want to prioritize them other than agree that there was a priority in there somewhere, and we look forward to seeing someone else come up with that priority list. We took on an action item, or at least threw off an action item for someone hopefully to do tomorrow at the hackathon, which is about kind of trialing a basic viewing tool of a citation based around a book, and seeing how that goes, and whether that throws up just by the kind of physical, digital access, putting something together and actually displaying it in front of people, whether that makes any kind of immediate things fall out of that work. And that's it.
Thank you. No one signed up for the next one.
No one signed up for the next one. Which session is it?
So that was for 3E, and Mahmoud was the lead, and Stefan was the note taker.
That's me.
Can you do it?
Yeah. You were swamped with volunteers for other sessions, so okay. So yes, it's me again, Mahmoud. Basically, this session was about donating, and like so many of you here who donate your time and your money, we had many people who were eager to donate their data and discuss data donations. So I'm going to move to the side here. Sorry, Dario. Okay, so yeah, we basically discussed our experiences with data donations being on all sides of this activity. And we had a lot of interesting perspectives. The foremost one is that from an outsider perspective, it's still not very easy to donate data. It's not really a self-service activity. It's something that you kind of need to know someone to do. Magnus came up a lot. So yeah. So it's kind of nebulous, but there are a few like supernova. And basically we want, and that's okay. Actually, we sort of concluded that that's not the worst thing right now at this earlier stage. We're a community, we're all here. It's okay to like talk to each other and not have it be totally self-service, but we want to get there. Okay, so yeah, that gave us our first action item actually. We wanted to update and improve the data import hub documents and the data donation documents to sort of like make sure that they're up to date. We'll talk about what that means in a second. A few principles on what's currently ripe for Wikidata. So another observation we had is that even though we're supposed to be discovering best practices have to be contextualized within the state of Wikidata now. So there are some people who are, just sitting on top of 90 million items that they'd love to put into Wikidata, except that at that point we would have, 90% of Wikidata being bibliographic material. So that doesn't really make sense in terms of, notability and these other requirements. So instead, we decided to not just highlight best practices, but also highlight data sets that are ripe for donation. And so rather than looking for the right way to donate my data, so I can get what I want at Wikidata right now, instead let's keep our eyes open for data which is stable, something that doesn't require sync, something that you can sort of like, clean up and put in and not require to keep it super up to date with a lot of maintenance burden. Also, data which is medium, maybe something like 10,000 to 100,000 statements would be really nice. 10,000, 15,000 items would be reasonable. Smaller is of course welcome too. And also has existing properties, so we don't have to necessarily go through a bunch of community processes to decide if these properties should be added or not. And specifically, if they have standard IDs, which are recognized. You all know about this by now, ORCIDs and whatnot. So we talked about the steps in best practice sort of uploads. So one is to refine the data using something like OpenRefine perhaps, but you clean up your data set. This is kind of the equivalent of editing on Wikipedia, making sure you don't have typos, right? If somebody has a grammatically well-formed edit, you know that it's a good faith edit, like just some of these basic surface level things. So how can we signal as a data donor that we've done some basic cleanup, some basic organization of the data, and I'm actually a good faith editor, a good faith data donor? Then the hard part is linking. This, I think, everyone agreed is one of the harder parts when you have deep amounts of semantics. You have to go into mix and match and make sure that everything actually links to the right Wikidata items and so forth. So we need to codify some heuristics in order to make it more self-service. But then finally we do an upload, and we have some hackathon ideas on how to do that. So make sure to get in touch if you want to work on easy upload. And then maintenance, and it was also recommended that people back import, so once they've donated, import back into their database so that they get the Wikidata IDs and other aspects. That's a way to make sure that things work well. So it was, okay, sure. One success story there was that Quora loaded in a bunch of data recently, and they actually got a lot of information about what, sort of inconsistencies they had within their data. They got that from Wikidata. So it can really be a two-way street. So we're going to work on why donate, update the donor hub, documentation, and I think that would be a really great, very achievable activity for people who want to write a little bit of wiki text for the hackathon. Okay, thank you.
Who is next? Okay.
Yours?
Yes.
Maria?
Can you go up a little bit? Yeah. Okay. Hi.
Hi.
I'm Katie. I'm from Harvard Libraries. 3F was talking about integrating with partners, integrating Wikicite with partners, and the people that showed up were mostly librarians, and we focused on how to work with GLAMs mostly. So essentially, we started with how to get librarians really involved in Wikicite. And often that's difficult to do because librarians have a lot of work to do, and it's hard to get librarians to understand how doing this during their workday is really going to affect their resources, their citations, their bibliographies, things like that. So communicating that is really important. By doing that, in order to do that, you can fit Wiki Data into mission statements for organizations. That should be pretty easy to do, depending on who you can get on your side. There's the model of the Wikipedian in residence at a lot of academic institutions, which is tremendous, and hopefully it would be good to add a Wikisite component to that. We can also identify funding opportunities. If you can get a grant to get a Wikipedian or a Wikimedian or a Wikidataist into a Wikicitian, whatever, into a library, then that would be great. We also talked a lot about outreach because we're librarians. So webinars, workshops, and different types of introductions to Wikidata and Wikicite could promote interest really effectively. You can do editathons, and you can include Wikidata entries and edits into editathons, which are really successful, and libraries get a lot of interest in those. For the webinars and workshops and things, you can customize invitations. If you say this is actually targeted directly to librarians because we want your expertise, we want your knowledge and your information. If you tell people that they're interesting and that they're valuable, they're more likely to contribute. It would also be wonderful to get Wikimedian people involved in the larger library and professional community. Libraries are becoming a lot more invested in the semantic web, and this would be a really great way to introduce concepts in a really widely used platform. I guess also getting GLAM metadata into Wikidata and Wikicite would be great, but it's hard, as the last presenter just said. So it would be great to have data models for unique content like archives collections, dissertations, and other things from institutional repositories. Libraries have and GLAMs have a lot of oral histories that can be very useful for citations, and then items and material with national and regional significance. GLAMs are really interested in promoting their actual content from their actual places, so that's a really effective way to get people involved and interested. Library students are a really good resource. They're really interested in new in new ways to direct the profession, and I think Wikimedia would be a really great way to introduce young professionals to that, or Wiki Data, excuse me. So we have a lot of ways to do that. It would be great to teach Sparkle to library students, and perhaps use something like the Zika corpus as an example. Something like Sparkle isn't really difficult to teach, but it is really difficult to get people using it in a natural way. Some of the examples are not exactly tailored to what people are using all the time. So if you can't create kind of natural use cases, then it doesn't get experimented with or played with or understood. And you can target iSchool students from the ground up by doing capstone projects and getting involved in student events. And you can also go from the top down by getting library directors involved. And yeah, we can also use Wikicite and Wikidata to improve a lot of issues that GLAMs have. And so there's a couple ways to do it. Done.
Hi, I'm Cameron Naglin. I'm reporting back on a very select session that was on the question of what's the best organisational form for Wikicite going forward. And this was basically me, Elizabeth Seaver, and then Arthur Smith came along at the end. So what we've done is we just went ahead, registered a shell company in the Bahamas, laundered a whole bunch of VC money, and then took that out into our own personal accounts. Yeah. So bye. So we didn't feel we had the right group there to make a strong recommendation. In particular, the three of us don't really actually have any experience of how communities and projects work in practice within the Wikimedia community. So that's a big caveat in what we're saying here. We posed a couple of questions. These questions at the heart of it were sort of which is the way forward for this. The first question, which is kind of, maybe it's a zero order, maybe it's obvious, but is this conference series valuable for this group? So is it worth having another conference? I'm not saying that because I think the answer is no. I'm saying that because it's a question we should ask ourselves, and that the purpose of generating a conference on some sort of regular basis suggests some organisational forms. Is this a community? And it seems like it is. I mean, there's something at the heart of this group which brings together a bunch of different communities. There's the Wiki Data folks, there's the people interested in citations and references within Wikipedia, and there's an academic group, and we have sort of some things in common. We also have some tensions. Like it's very clear this is not the Wiki Data community. And so expressing that in a way that says, okay, there are some tensions here, and what we want to achieve is to resolve those in some reasonably adult and productive fashion is an important aspect of what we want to do going forwards. But then again, is this a place where communities come together and identify common ground and tensions and resolve them? Or is it a community of itself? And then again, that has some implications for different forms. And then the final thing is, and there's sort of an implicit aspiration here to build an infrastructure, to build a set of services or data sources that will be widely used. And if that's the aspiration, then for an infrastructure to be used, it has to be sustainable, it has to have an organisational form, it has to be trusted, and it has to be sustainable, and it needs to work in the future, and it needs to be sustainable. So what would be the revenue source? What would be the form? And again, if that's a desire, then various things follow from that. So really those are the questions for you guys to think about, and maybe for the organisers to come back and look at in the form of surveys and other things at the end of the conference. So we don't have an answer. But hopefully those questions start to sharpen up the issue. And in particular, there's a really core issue here, which is the aspiration to build an infrastructure, or is the aspiration to gather and aggregate and curate a data set that will be put somewhere? Those are two things that require different kinds of organisational forms. One is infrastructures are heavy-duty, need to be sustainable, and have community governance and forms that are trusted. To gather and curate data, we can do that much more as a loosely knit community with some common interests. It doesn't need to be as organised and as formalised. It probably doesn't need the same kind of resources to run. So I think that's a really key question to keep asking ourselves. And I think it struck me as kind of the key tension that's run through a lot of our discussions. Is it about building infrastructure? Is it about gathering, curating, and pushing data to a place?
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's it. That's it. Excellent. Thanks so much, everyone, for doing this quickly and productively. Those were really good session summaries. We are a bit ahead of schedule, so I'm wondering, are there any questions you have about any of the summaries that we should discuss here? Or do we go into the hallway track?
No, we don't go.
We don't go in the hallway track.
Yeah, well, I would just like to underline the question that Lydia just put out. Did anything pop up from all those summaries that basically related to the sessions that you were in that couldn't be discussed in those summary frames? So please bring that up. Another thing to keep in mind is there's going to be a hackathon soonish. So some of the sessions already outlined some of the things that could be tackled in the hackathon. There's an Etherpad for that. Think about what you could put in there. And yeah, now let's try to put those things together. These were, we had to kind of split it into the different sessions, otherwise we couldn't have discussed all those topics. Now we have to bring it together again.
Should we just discuss? Let's be honest.
Yeah, there's a mic. You can do with it whatever you want.
I have a mic, everyone. I can do with it whatever I want. So are we just supposed to basically pitch hackathon ideas now, or is that later?
The hackathon ideas go into the Etherpad, preferably. Now we're in the business of trying to link those things. If something, of course, if it has something to do with the hackathon, you can kind of mention it, but here the point is of bringing these things together. If any of the summaries, for instance, you've given 2 summaries.
Yes.
Do you see a link between the 2 things that you've been doing? Do you see a way to
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, like we said, we're trying to build tools for right-sized data donation, and so identifying like the right data sets to bring in, and encouraging and seeking out those right-sized data sets, and then giving people tools to bring those in. So, you know, basically we want to maybe bring in the books that were published before 1700. That's supposedly like a rather small data set, but it's used a lot of different places. There's been some success on the French wiki for that sort of thing. So, yeah. And then we're basically building a command line version of quick statements and mix and match and all these things.
Ideally not just a command line, but auth, and so it could be deployed somewhere so that every editor can use it on...
We've done this before. Okay. Thank you, Dan. All right, Phoebe.
One common thread across a couple of the sessions that I was in, and something I want to work on in the hackathon, and somebody else here wants to work on the hackathon, is making just patterns, like user guides for how to form citations in Wikidata. You know, like you want to cite a journal article in Wikidata, what do? Here's some example fields. Here's a best practice example. I think this requires no technical skill. It just requires like some knowledge of Wikidata and some knowledge of the formats being cited. So that could be a fun project for some of us.
It could also help form consensus on how these things should actually be done.
Yeah, definitely. Like along those guidelines, like, you know, people were wondering, you know, what should the relationship be with Wikidata citation information? Like, if you're an organization, why would you want to like basically donate this data? And I think finding a nice phrasing that sort of puts it out there as an investment, right? You know, not something you just take from, would be good too. Motivational statements. All right. Other folks who've seen some common threads. Yes.
So I think a theme that's emerged in a bunch of these discussions is the question of what's the decision-making structure here. I've heard a lot of, oh, we could try this, but they might not like it, or this is hard because it means getting these different groups together, or we just don't know whether this is appropriate. And so, I mean, this goes back to the organisational question again, but thinking about ways in which the right people can be brought together rapidly to give guidance, not necessarily a decision, that will help people understand what they can and should do, would seem a practical thing. And it goes back to what Jonathan was also saying about patterns and bring groups together and having projects that connect up the people.
All right. More?
I'm going to hijack the mic and make a comment. Yeah, so building partly what Cameron was saying, but also themes that emerged during the discussion. I'm thinking about documentation and why that is important and what the identity is of this thing that we're doing together. Cameron, you're right. So we're actually creating by cold fusion some kind of aggregate of communities that have a shared interest and they want to build something together. And it's great that this is happening organically. There's a lot that's been happening over the last year. Day one was amazing to me. It was like was blown away by reports on everything that's been happening. As a newcomer to this loosely connected set of communities, I think it's really challenging to understand, like you said, what this is about, who's driving it, what are decisions, who's making decisions, what are norms. And I think this is particularly complex because it's a community within a community, or within when it comes to Wiki Data, and because it's a community that spans multiple Wikimedia communities. And my feeling on this is that documentation and explainers, there were some excellent suggestions on mailing lists about aligning terminology, making sure that we all agree on what we're calling a citation, a reference, a source. We all agree on the meaning of must or should in the context of a constraint, which is something that we're all very passionate about, but it needs to be clear to newcomers to onboard them. I think documentation has a key role to play, and I like to encourage ourselves to spend more time into building rich and readable documentation as a step for onboarding newcomers.
More? All right, then I would say off to the break. And see you soon for lightning talks.
What time?
Oh, yes, a time. 4:30.
I'm just here to be just.
Jonathan? 30, not 45.
I figured it was 15 minutes for the break.
Let's do breaks. 45.
What do you want? Leave it at 45?
I just asked, yeah, but also more time for people to actually mingle and talk.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah. All right, people, lightning talks at 45.
Sure.
I was just European power. Nothing there. Yeah, but I'm sitting there. So I need to go to the toilet.
Yeah,
She's bringing it through. Okay. How much? I don't think worst case, we'll give it to Adam. He is. Oh yeah,
One thing of the summary of our best practices we did. I was trying to read your patient's questions. You didn't look extremely upset, so I think you weren't that. But you also looked extremely happy, so
you should not take my facial expression for approval or disapproval of any decision.
I think that's about all we got from the barometer of the data, like how much you're proud of it. Or if you look like really scared, it's like you guys are gonna tunnel.
So you should have read my face when James was on. Anyway, no, I mean, we have data import process. They surely can actually build out more. I think they are much better than half a year ago, but
this is using YouTube Live to stream. So
is there a specific alpha, right? Yeah.
So on the Apple, you have to download YouTube, but then on the Android, it's built into the basic camera app because it's all Google, right? So they have a live broadcast function that can go straight. Yeah.
Otherwise, what do they do like before and after? Like, do they get all over?
So they have this video manager. So you can start so this is a stats board. So you can see like when people start watching, when this dropped off. So it also tells you what's the health of the video coming in and going over Wi-Fi. So if everything's good, you see good, but then sometimes it goes slow down or whatever. It's been stable pretty much the whole time.
So we're still streaming now?
We're still streaming, yeah. That's right. So it's usually best for the streaming part is just to start streaming and just let it go until the end of the event. Whereas this one, I kind of stop and start, because then every time you stop it, it uses a different URL, on top of find those things. But then you can also, like what I normally use, I upload a custom thumbnail there, so it's got the Wikicite brand there, and then also go in here, and what I do is change this from the YouTube license to Creative Commons. Put it under education, so if people are searching for this, they can find it better under education. Anything else? Not really.
I created a fabricator task place because I was realizing, like, if you're not here to save the day or these times, like, we're going to be super screwed and, like,
Yeah.
And it seems like it works really well.
It works pretty well. I mean, as long as we have Wi-Fi stable, it's been pretty good this whole week. And peaked at 9 simultaneous, but I think
afterwards, I think I saw that there were like on Facebook there were like 400 views already.
Yeah, that's true. There were like I think there's approaching 200 at least on YouTube. But you're right, the Facebook Live stuff could have been. So at one time I did 3 things at the same time. I did YouTube, Facebook Live, and Report Data.
What did you do Facebook Live with?
With I have an extra iPhone.
Oh, so you had 2 phones. Oh, that's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Facebook Live, okay. And that all works totally.
Yeah, so Facebook Live is built into the Facebook app. You just kind of pick it up, and then I stuck it like right here. It's kind of crazy. You can't.
And you have a stand that stand.
Yeah, so I have another one that clamps on here, and then you can have a second or third phone if you want. But it's kind of crazy that if you want to do like YouTube and Facebook Live, you need different phone. Like you can't just use one source and spread it out.
Yeah, well, either way, I mean, it's really helpful that you've been able to do this stuff here. Yeah, and it's passive. Yeah. Video recording is always a problem that it seems like it's really hard.
Well, yeah, and also the phone helps a lot. So it's kind of you can't see it, but this is a really wide angle lens. Like it's catching from this point almost all that Wiki Data posters. It's really wide. The nice thing about that is that means the phone can be really close and capture everything, and then the audio is better. So you kind of, because of the wide angle lens, you get better audio. It's kind of a weird thing.
May I just test maybe know that rather than recognition topic, that it's yeah, I need either a mini display or a VGA. Filing decisions. So basically, evaluation and as a result, the allocation of some specific entirely based as of today and these are all metrics that are
relying on Scopus is just relying on Scopus surface and control. It's just a
it turns out that so, the owners of the make so in that case they make the curate in ways that give them
I also discovered that
there is a very solid research suggests that no. So
oh wow, you got that going?
Web of Science, which is just a source of the is owned by Thomson Reuters. It used to be owned by Thomson Reuters. It's been sold for
thank you.
$12 billion to a new private equity.
There is no European sockets at the front tables at this side.
Okay, yeah, they only have
Well, yeah, I was trying to make this work before and it didn't work, so I think you might have the magic.
Just grab on.
I just want to test it. Thank you.
You guys go again.
So what is Scopus up to?
Scopus is a factor, but Scopus is a user source of raw citation data that evaluation users use beyond the integrator.
Okay. I'm gonna have to sharpen that argument.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll let you get started.
Yeah,
I want to continue this conversation just before and then to be continued. Thanks.
Thank you. Which one do you need?
Suddenly the dev team becomes anybody that wants to write something. Switches architecture. Gary wanted to follow up on something. Yeah.
I was just emailing her.
Yes.
So yes, I can. Ah, you. Then.
Switch?
You have to switch. Yes. Switch is there, so it's okay.
I mentioned it's a little bit different. I think that when it goes to full screen.
4? I think they're oversubscribed already, so but I'm happy to, after dinner we can just sit down with a bunch of folks and I can go through it.
Let's see.
Oh, it's
You have actually my own adapter. HTML structure.
maybe it'll like automatically solve the question.
Well, I mean, one model of that Cornell hosting archive. You can get that relation to the university to work. That's great.
There is a
British Library and the university. There are
Your chair? No, I'm just a first one.
useful incubator that is offered by the university. So maybe it would be a possibility we can look at
I should say that we are naive as far as
Eventually, in the process of raising money,
cool. Let's get it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No. They're trying to take open citation to answer a proposal and put it Yes? Starting at, sorry, yeah, mix up on the thing. We're actually going to start at for another 15 minutes.
Yeah, I know, but I should be prepared.
Oh, you first?
Yes.
Great, yes. So start at, put your slides up. Cheers.
In person. Where in real life? Wiki Summer was amazing. I'm sure I've seen you since then. Menu? I haven't been watching all my dated.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't matter. Where are you? Are you on there? I have information. And then you
Exactly. Exactly. We have
So I don't know anything about Purple. That was 15 years ago. So I don't know how old I My cohort was purely this is one of our cohort. We were an on-campus cohort, so like we're also super like there's the past can be like was a good range, but it is your and then you the other thing is and I went just well, there's some two things. Yeah, some stuff. So I have some projects that are more like like I've got some traditional libraries that I want to run. But for like I don't know what that means. I don't know what that looks like. But you know, it's like sanitizing but this is the Anyway, if it's I mean, my day-to-day is but I'm not sure it matters. I do research as well, so but I'm not power I have power over things that can be caught, things that can be like
management systems are just the worst possible protection from all of that.
Yeah, so like there's that. Yeah, library hard to come up with what they think is libraries. Library is just always a problem, but internet, so Well, pitch to you, teaching engineering. Like the professional work that he does. Not that many. Yeah, no, that is. I mean, maybe Google our
Yeah, so, what do we want to talk about?
I have English and I'm doing comp sci.
Yes.
I'm like a speech study. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So.
Sure. I can talk to what Wikicite is. I can talk to sort of what the conference methodology around that is. I have not been that closely connected to each of the projects. Sure. Sure. So the group of us in the organization are each connected into sort of different aspects of what we work together. And I think the point was well made earlier tonight when people talked about how
I've heard from Gary we need more blocks for tomorrow. Can I give you this today? Sure. Yes? Okay. Perfect. Thank you. I'll just grab it in. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So yeah, let's
It should be in the
office. So what's the process?
I would mean to lodge here, but I'm like interested in this topic. Like,
Great. It's one big room.
And it's something like I'll send you that would make it easy. I can send it now, or I can
Let's do it right after
a
dinner.
send here because I
One of the reasons I visited last night I really prefer to do this but I also did some great
but so right now
yeah, no, I think when do you become less busy?
Never.
Immediately after. So like I mean,
Hey there.
Let's talk about the Montreal Public Library thing when you and what we could both.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
And I said after dinner.
Because Monica is registering, she's coming to both.
Good.
NA and we were talking about what we could propose for the program. So maybe a composition there could be a good thing.
That'd be good. So that'll be Wednesday that we're looking at. We could even do more Thursday. Thursday's like the structured program that we'll have for ourselves. So we could certainly have her talk there. Do you know if she submitted something to the main community program?
Yes, and it got accepted. So
Okay.
we both we put in a proposal on just kind of like a Wikipedia and libraries, what's happening globally.
Good.
So that's on the main program. That has a global focus, but this could have both a public library focus and
Right.
because our the Knight funded program is for public libraries in the U.S. But it's still public libraries.
Sure.
And we're thinking, like the 23 things is libraries generally.
Right.
Getting it translated to French would be good.
Maybe that's even something you could do as part of the hackathon days, is just get someone to translate to French. Or is it something yet?
It's not done yet, but it will be done soon.
By then? By then? Okay.
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be done by ALA.
Darius?
ALA is,
I just need power from
Just the English version. So
using
you're looking for people to help
adapter.
translate. That could be like a part of the hackathon, is translating-a-thon. Just get as many folks
other
to
people
translate.
using the adapters.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Spanish. We can continue it as a hack thing into the main program.
That's right.
Translated, so we could get our Wikipedia and libraries users group to get it translated.
Right.
Get them to adopt it and get it translated.
That's good. So after dinner, who was it? One of our folks in our group last week wanted to see what I talked about to the LC in terms of Wiki Data. So if you want, I can also bring you in on that too, just to show you kind of what we did in like 10 to 15 minutes on Wiki Data and librarians and archivists.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Yeah, and I would like to talk to you about how we can, what we can do with that archives thing a little better.
Right.
Because just saying it's at the, so I don't know if this came through like this, but what I was trying to say is just saying the archives are at an institution is really like leaving somebody in a place, because then they have to go to track it now.
Right.
Because if you say archives are at UC Berkeley, there's so many repositories at UC Berkeley. If you
Right.
say it's at a repository,
So that's
then
what we need your help
You
in.
need to get them to find like. what-
Okay, folks, so
What the right
just some
qualifiers
quick
are.
things again to prepare for the hack tomorrow morning, and just give you some warning on how that's going to work. Etherpad is linked from the top of the program page for tomorrow. It has 3 sections. Those 3 sections are... What's the first section? Someone tells me what's the... there's a new section there. That was the one I wanted to tell you about, which includes skills. So if you've got skills you want to share with people tomorrow, then please do that. The way we will run tomorrow will be very simple. Take a look at those ideas overnight. Have a think about which ones are most important. Tomorrow morning we'll start just with people lined up, pitching, people seeing whether they're interested, and moving straight from there into the hack informally, and then coming back to report at the end of the day. So it's going to be very simple, very informal. So do a little bit of homework, looking at the things that have been suggested, the kind of skills that you think might be needed, you might be able to offer or you might need, and data sets that you have. That's the third one. Please add links to data sets, or if you have a local copy of a data set that's large and might be valuable, then catch me and I will give you the hard drive. Thank you, and pass back to Jonathan.
Thank you. Can the next person for the next lightning talk come on up to the front, and you're on.
Thank you. I want to speak about cataloging citations from print and electronic resources and libraries. And actually, this is a project which we just started. You see here the URL. And I just want to give you a brief glimpse. So what are actually project goals? Well, our main goal is to prove that efficient and sustainable cataloging of citations is possible in libraries. And so this means we are not so focused on doing a lot of data, but more into processes. So we want well-documented, manageable workflows for data capturing. And so we imagine that they will consist of 2 parts. Kind of, we have the librarians, so they will still have to fix some of the things, and they will especially be needed for the quality. And the other thing is we want to do a lot, so we need some automatism networks for the quantity things. We want that this is embedded in the routine workflow. So for new acquisition, if new books are bought and coming into the libraries, or maybe also the new journals or renewal of journals, it should be part of this. Well, if we solve that then you can also think of in a project that you just want retrospectively to look at some very special, interesting collection and do that. We want to do it for every publication, so journals, monographs, and collections, and for print and online resources. So we also will tackle the print resources where there is no online resource. And actually, in the end, there should be something like a cost-benefit analysis for the decision maker, that they see they can put that much resources into this workflow, and will get something out of it. And maybe if then a lot of decision maker libraries will think this is a good idea, we can do even more. So this is the planned architecture workflow. So you see there is some database stuff in the middle. Actually, it's even a distributed one. And there are kind of the resources on the right. So the print, PDF, web. So for the print, certainly we need an OCR component. Actually, you see that the arrows here are also for the others. We can run it through the OCR, but there might be more direct ways. We just have to figure that out more in detail, what's the best and the easiest to come up here. Then on the left, we have kind of the data which is already there, or which is maybe coming also more, and which we want certainly to use. So there are some library data, publishers maybe also, and some of the Wikicite, Open Citations, cross-ref things data, which we would like to use also, and maybe also to connect them back or give something back. And everything else kind of just in this linked open data cloud. Then there is on the top kind of the editorial system. So that's the part where there's still the librarians. They have to fix things, and it has to flow back to the system, hopefully also improve some of the stuff, and hopefully in a manner that they don't have to do that many corrections to fix all or a lot of the things. So the vision is actually really, this is should be just some part of this LOD part, linked open data cloud. And well, it's distributed, and there are a lot of other things, and there should be connections between them, maybe just links, or sometimes maybe also copying some of the data. There can also be things outside this main kind of linked open data cloud, which we still also want to connect or do some stuff. So our principles, we want actually to reuse as much as possible. So if there is any data already there and it's kind of fit and it's good for us, we want to reuse that. The same is true for the tools. And we want to use OCR, automatic reference extraction, smart lookups, to automate as much as possible. And in the end, or kind of the editorial system, it has to be efficient to deal with all these manual interactions. And in the end, the output should be open linked data, open software, and open workflows. So these are just the project key facts. So you see again our website. It's funded by the German Research Foundation, and we started in October. There are the other partners here from Germany, the DFK, Kaiserslautern, Hochschule der Medien, ZBW, and we are kind of the partners of this project. Thank you.
Next up, we have Eric Miller. Next up, we have Stephen Laporte.
Hi. So I'm Stephen from the Wikimedia Foundation legal team. I wanted to start with sort of a bit of a hypothetical. Okay. So imagine you're an attorney and you receive a question from someone. You're guys getting feedback? Yeah.
Stand a little further back or turn it.
Yeah. So imagine you receive a question from someone who's a librarian who has been very bold and decided to scan all the books they have in their collection. They scan them all. They decide that they're not doing anyone any real harm because these books are just going to be used internally to make them maybe more searchable. But the publishers sort of disagree and send them something that looks very scary, something very demanding that says, you've broken the law and you've committed copyright infringement and you have, you owe us lots of money. So if you're an attorney, what are you going to do in response to that? Well, the first thing that any good attorney should do is make sure they are looking at the most up-to-date law. And that ultimately is a research question. And a research question that I feel that we could be solving better with the Wikimedia universe. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how attorneys go about doing their research, the sort of things they're looking for in research material, talk a little bit about what the Wikimedia community can provide and what exists inside the status quo, what other alternative resources are out there, and then finally make a case for why this matters, the case for open access legal research. So first, the things that really matter are pretty fundamental. These are really non-negotiables if you're going to do legal research on any platform. So the first thing that anyone is going to look for is the ability to discover relevant law. You need to be able to find the cases that are actually on point, cases that discuss things like digitization of works, copyright infringement, and things like that. There's very powerful tools for doing this sort of research in the status quo. If you use a proprietary system like Westlaw, they have actually tagged all the case law based off of specific topics. So you can use this to find relevant cases. But the moment you actually find your case, your research doesn't stop. You second need to be able to tell if that case has been overruled, if there's a statute on point, if that case has been treated negatively or positively, maybe the law has changed, right? So most proprietary research tools will do an analysis of the source you're looking at along two dimensions. Has it been treated positively or negatively? And how closely has this point you're specifically looking at been discussed? Has it been merely examined? Has it been cited by something else? Or has it actually been overruled or actually changed? And if you can't do this sort of backwards and forwards research, you can't tell if this case you're looking at actually answers your question. And then finally, you need to make sure that there's not something else out there that didn't show up in your research. If you actually look through the published printed versions of cases, there's an entire volume that tracks which case cites which other case, and you have to look it up and see in this table if you have been overruled by something else. These books are published through a very rigorous process that a law librarian will be familiar with, and there's sort of certifications to show that the collection you're looking at is a complete copy of all the statutes or case law. So when you're using a service like Westlaw or LexisNexis, they actually make guarantees to you, and they say cases that have been passed within the last 24 hours are included within our database. That's a very high bar for anyone to meet in the Wikimedia universe. We're sort of used to doing research that might be open-ended, but we're not quite sure if there's other research out there that is relevant. So you sort of need these three tools. You need to be able to find what you're looking for. You need to be able to see if it has been cited by something else and how it's been treated. And you need to be able to make sure that this has been that this set you're looking at is complete. And we thankfully have a lot of the start of all of these tools already inside the Wikimedia universe. We have case summaries on Wikipedia. We have copies of cases available on Wikisource, and we have a subset of this information on Wiki Data. Now, other people have done open access legal citations, but they're not tackling all three of those at the same time. So I think we have a lot to contribute. And finally, since the law is something that governs everyone's life and is something that people literally depend on to stay out of prison or their future employment depends on, I think that this is a very high priority for us to be tackling as a community. So if you're at all interested in this, or you have experience with receiving one of these angry letters over digitizing your works, I would love to talk to you. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, Bresnik. And Jake, can you come up? You're next.
Okay. So yeah, my name is Besnik. I come from the University of Hanover. So here, what I'm going to just briefly mention is some work that recent work about citation span. So I spoke yesterday to a couple of people who were interested in the finding the citation context, and this is basically what I will show here is for given a citation and a paragraph in which this is referenced. So what does it actually cover, right? And so the motivation, I guess, here I don't have to say much, but some of the key aspects that you have to take into account here is that citations in Wikipedia currently do not have an explicit span saying, okay, it covers these and these sentences or sub-sentences or text fragment. And since things change in the Wikipedia article, so also even if there would be such explicit markers, then this would be subject to that change, okay? So this is basically the context of this work. And here, I focused only on web and news citation. The reason for that is that these are accessible online, and if you would want to do this for books and so on, this is much more complicated process since you have to parse all the which page it is citing and so on, so it's much more complicated. So what are the possible citation spans in Wikipedia? And just to mention that here I do it, the citation span is done basically at the sub-sentence level. The motivation for that is that if you consider here the all possible citation spans, you have here, for example, a sentence in the Barack Obama's Wikipedia article, you have a sub-sentence here when he was born, and it has a citation, then you have another sub-sentence, another citation, and so on. And then you have the other case where you have a single sentence and this has a citation, and then you have a paragraph which contains only a citation. So these are the three possible cases. And now here, for example, it's not clear, for example, C3, what it covers, right? So this is quite a challenging problem. And to do this at the sentence level, obviously it's already a mistake because you see here that the fineness grain is basically at the sub-sentence level. So just a very, very brief outline of the approach. So the most reasonable way to do this is, since you have text, sentences, and a paragraph, they form a sequence, right? So, and you want to do this as a sequence classification. So you have each of these sub-sentences here, and then you try to say, okay, given, so what is the label of this sub-sentence? Given the citation that you are analyzing. So you try to classify each of these sequences, and then you say, okay, it covers this and that part of the text. And I'm not going to bother you too much about the what possible features you can use, but something that works reasonably well is just if you take into account the structure of the paragraph. For example, if you have let's say other citations in the paragraph, if this paragraph is only a single sentence, then it's likely that this citation will cover the entire sentence, and then the distance in terms of sub-sentences to the citation, and then you have, for example, other discourse NLP features that you can use, and this works reasonably well. So yeah, it works pretty accurately, and the important part is that if you do this, then you can just, even for those cases that have citations, you can say it covers this part and this part remains uncovered, so you can find the citation. So, yeah, that would be it. Questions, I guess.
We could take one question.
Yeah.
How are you measuring the accuracy?
So the accuracy is basically, so you have one paragraph, right? And each the paragraph is chunked into sub-sentences, and I manually evaluated like each sub-sentence if it's covered by the citation. And then basically, like if you try to predict and you predict some sub-sentence that is actually covered, but it's not, then it's a false positive, and so.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. Jake? Next presentation is Jake Orlowitz. Is he here? Nope. Okay, next is Andy Mabbott. And next after that is Olga.
So if Jake's not here, do I get 10 minutes?
No.
Sorry, no.
No, you don't. Hi, how many of you have an ORCID ID? Good. Those of you who don't have an ORCID ID, and that was quite a lot, I'm quite pleased with that. Those of you who don't have an ORCID ID, how many of you never contribute content online to Wikipedia or Wikidata? Right, then that means the rest of you should have an ORCID ID as well. For those of you who don't know, an ORCID ID is a unique identifier like a VIAF ID or an ISBN for a person. And it helps us to disambiguate people with the same name from each other. Or if you change your name because you marry or divorce or you change religion or you just fancy a different name, it helps us to say you're the same person. And that's also true if you publish as William Smith in one place, W. Smith in another, and Bill Smith in a third. Or if you have an Arabic or a Chinese name that's transliterated into the Western alphabet differently by different publishers, or indeed vice versa. We've already heard in a couple of the sessions today that ORCID IDs are very important for that reason, for disambiguating authors about whom we have a Wikidata item. It's very important that we use those disambiguators so that we can help people to know which author we're talking about. So why have we only got just over 2,000 ORCID IDs in Wikidata currently? Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. One is you can't automate with a machine adding those ORCID IDs just by searching on somebody's name. By their very nature, they're used for disambiguation. So if we have 100 William Smiths or Y Yangs or whatever the name might be, we can't tell which is which with a computer. We need a human to look at them and interpret them. I do that. I try and do a couple every day. At the end of the day, it's the last thing I do before I turn my laptop off. But I need some help. I need more of you to do that. So please join with me in doing that. There are list pages on Wikipedia and Wikidata where there are lists of people who we know are researchers who are currently active and don't have an ORCID ID. And every time I search for them on the ORCID website, about 1 in 3 has an identifiable record on the ORCID website, and we can get the ORCID ID from it. About 1 in 3 has an ORCID ID, a match rather for their name on the ORCID website, but we can't tell whether or not it's the same person because the ORCID record has no public information, and about a third provides no name. But even with 1 in 3, rather than 2,000, I think we need somewhere between 20 and 200,000 ORCID IDs to be nearing a complete set. So there's a lot more work to do there. During the hackathon, we'll have the opportunity to perhaps look at some automated tools for bringing in some of the ORCID IDs where we have a link between an author and a publication, and for the publication we have a DOI or a link to a web page, and that publication has some metadata which includes the ORCID ID. So there might be something we can do there. I'm not a coder. I'll be relying on those of you who are to help me with that tomorrow, please. I've also written some pages on Wikipedia, Wikidata and on Meta about how we use ORCID IDs, both for Wikipedians and Wikimedians and for researchers who you may know, so you can just send them a link to one of those pages, and for institutions and publishers. So if you're here representing an institution or a publisher, please have a look at the relevant page, share it with your colleagues, or if you know somebody from one of those institutions, one of those types of institutions, pass that link on to them. Because if somebody can provide me with a list of 20 academics from their university who have a Wikipedia biography with a list of the Wikipedia article names and the ORCID IDs, I can very quickly add those to Wikidata for them, and I'm happy to do that, as long as not every university in the world writes to me all at once. I also have a page on Meta where we talk about the possibility of ORCID in the future. We could start to encourage more Wikipedians to sign up for an ORCID ID as they create their account. We could do some integration between the two systems. This is some very blue sky thinking, but do have a look at it. All those links are in the Etherpad for this session, so they're nice and easy for you to find, and I'm here all day tomorrow and of course this evening if you want to have a chat about it. Thank you very much, and please put your own ORCID ID on your Wikimedia user pages. Thank you.
Can I ask a question if we have any?
We have a minute left, I think.
Yeah, go ahead. I have 1 ORCID, 2 ISNI numbers, and 3 VIAF records.
Yeah.
So how do we work with VIAF? There's people from OCC here, right? To try to tighten up things and clean up.
I'll hand you over to Marilyn.
So, yeah, basically the question is whether VIAF can trust the ORCID being single to merge the ISNIs.
So let's take that question offline afterwards.
Oh, yeah. Hello everyone, my name is Olga. I came from Gesis Leibniz Institute in Cologne, Germany. And so, let's go. So, imagine you want to study some topic which is not from your main area. And basically, in this case, I would like to learn about gender pay gap, and I would end up at the Wikipedia page. At the bottom of this Wikipedia page, we have references, sure. But the question arises, are those references which are used in this article are of a high value in the field of gender pay gap? And with this motivation to answer to that question, we are going to compare the references used in Wikipedia articles and articles with a highly cited, which are highly cited in the field, and also those which has a high online attention. So basically, we restricted our set of articles to scientific articles, and first we looked only into the social science field. So we basically used template social sciences. We mined automatically articles. We used templates in those articles too, and at the end we got about 2,700 articles in the field of social science. And we mined DOIs, so it was like 6,700 DOIs overall, where we have 970 with at least one, and 50% of the articles has from 1 to 6 DOIs each. Yes, if we look into the articles which has the highest number of DOIs, it was evolution article, which is maybe not a social science, but that one is related to social sciences as well. And the second set was the set of the highly cited articles. So basically, we from Scopus and Web of Science, we took the first percentile of highly cited article in each year for last 10 years, and we restricted our query for social sciences and economics. And the third data set was from altmetric.com, where we took the 8,000 articles with the highest altmetric score, which basically for those who are not aware about altmetric score, so basically this is aggregated score, where I took some random example where some article has the score of 256, which means it has about 10 news articles, about 100 tweets, and so on. And basically our list contains of the articles with the highest altmetric score. Yes, and then so we want to compare those sets, so basically which were highly cited and from Wikipedia. First, we calculated our overlap, and surprisingly, the overlap was very small. So, for example, from Web of Science, social science field, it was like 54 papers only, which were shared in both sets. But anyways, we want to know whether those articles, they really have a high citation numbers, or they are chosen randomly, and there is no relation here. So what we did, we calculated sum of ranks, and we perform a simulation where we 10 times randomly flipped labels, so whether article was in Wikipedia or not. Yes, and then calculated for those 10,000 cases, we calculated sum of ranks, and okay. So this I will skip, yes. And what we found, that was the distribution of our sum of ranks, and the red dot, of course, Wikipedia citation, which was proved that basically for most cases, the sum of ranks was lower than randomly chosen articles. Yeah, thank you. Yes, and what that means, so basically Wikipedia citations tend to have higher number of citations if you look into Web of Science database, and also for most chunks from Scopus, but not all. So basically what I mean by chunks, so basically we look into first 100, first 200 articles in each of database, first 1,000, first 2,000, and so on. And not for all of the chunks it was true. And for altmetric scores set, Wikipedia citations tend to have higher altmetric score also. But as I said before, the overlap was very small, so the idea is, so basically we need to increase somehow that number as there are members of community which cites it. And because we did our analysis only based on the DOIs in a social science and only on English Wikipedia, their further research would be constrained. So we would be the cross-language, cross-field, and study, yes, between them. And we will include other data identifiers. Yes, that's it. Yes, if I have 10 seconds, I would like to say that I'm from Metrics project, with which study altmetrics aggregators and also perception of scientists of these altmetrics.
Great,
Yes.
thank you. Next up is Phoebe.
Hi, everyone. So I want you to raise your hand if you have ever helped anyone find a piece of information or find a bad citation that somebody had trouble with. Congratulations, you're all reference librarians. Do I have the output? Yes, I do. Great. So I am also a reference librarian. That's my day job. I am a science and engineering librarian at the MIT libraries. I am also a Wikipedian. And what I thought for something different is that I would show you 5 reference questions that I've gotten recently about citations. So people ask me to find stuff for them. What did they ask me for? Well, I'm going to show you 5 examples of citations and what I think we can learn from these edge cases about citation databases in general. And these are all real questions from real MIT researchers, unedited. The first one, there's a book published on entrepreneurship in the late 1960s, early 70s by someone. I contributed a chapter. I don't remember the title or the author. This is a classic reference question. This is the kind of stuff they give us in library school. Do you think you could find it? Number 2, do we have access to Bracewell and Swanson, title, report number ER633, Electric Power Research Institute, February 1978, A4 pages. Thanks. Question number 3. I'm looking for Edward Elgar's Symphony number 1 and number 2, but I want a specific performance, and I want it on CD. I could only find the streaming audio link in your catalog. Great. Question number 4. I'm interested in obtaining the original publication in German by Ludwig Boltzmann. I won't butcher the German, but it was published here, actually, in Vienna, in 1872. And if you pay attention to this citation, actually, this looks like it's formatted like a journal. This is not a journal. This is a book thing that came out of the university. Anyway. Multi-part monograph, as Marilee says. Question number 5. Can I get the text of design wetland treatment systems that contribute to wildlife conservation, blah, 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 citation? It was in this conference proceeding, in wetland systems for water pollution control, number 8, 2002, Tanzania. This looks like a perfectly normal conference proceeding citation. Fine. Okay. What does this tell us? Number 1. We found this book because there are multiple access points in WorldCat. There's a table of contents in the record in WorldCat that we were able to extract the author's name out of. Also, the editor, which you will notice is not Putnam. My rule of thumb is that the patron's always wrong with citations because citation data is very easy to change. But there's also association data, like who put out the book. Number 2, you'll recall, this is the report. It turns out that there was an OCR error in the title of this report that was replicated in lots of published citations over time. So the 1 is actually meant to be a T. Also, this is actually online and digitized, but you have to use this report number and not that report number, even though they're the same report number. EPRI reports are kind of a weird thing, but they're cited a lot. Okay. Number 3, this is the symphony where he wanted a specific edition. We've talked a lot about Ferber. Sometimes Ferber really matters. And it matters in cases like this where when you search for Elgar Symphony number 1 in WorldCat, you get 8,000 results, 2,000 of which are CDs, and et cetera, et cetera. I am not a music librarian. I never want to be a music librarian. Music is terrible. But Ferber matters for things like this where people want specific performances.
Mark is unkind to music.
Mark is super unkind to music. Music librarians are heroes. Number 4, this is the Boltzmann paper from 1872. This is a classic in the field. It turns out that you can find references to it in bibliographies, not Wikipedia, although you can now, thanks to me. But it was published in the Collected Works of Boltzmann, which was an English publication that was made later. That's available in the US. The original, the Viennese thing, it might be available here. It is not available in the US. And the lesson for me from this is that every library is incomplete. I have worked in several of the great research libraries of the US. I worked in the University of California, which is the largest academic library in the world. Now I work at MIT, which shares resources with Harvard, one of the largest academic libraries in the world. Nobody has everything, not TIB, not RLUK, not us. Every library is incomplete.
1 minute.
Number 5, even if you do cite it, you don't have your hands on the thing. So this is the conference proceeding. It turns out we have the selected proceedings. Lots of places have the selected proceedings. The paper this person wants, not in the selected proceedings. The selected proceedings were never actually distributed to libraries. There's like one copy somewhere, not in the US. Many people cite things without ever seeing them. It's a big problem. And I'm serious. Whenever somebody cites like classic papers, the chances of them having their hands on that paper, slim. Which is not academically great, but what it means is that there are having the thing and citing the thing are two different problems. Historically, we've required different tools to solve those problems. So my takeaways are citations are weird. They're imprecise. They don't always cite something you can get your hand on. And there's a very, very long tail of literature here. We still use lots of specialty and proprietary citation indexes, which are necessary to find that tool. And did you notice one other thing about all these citations, except for the first one? Is there a commonality? None of them are books or journals, y'all. Only the first one is a book, and it's a little shaky because it was like self-published and a little weird. But none of these things are books and journals. This is what I get asked about. This is what people use. The long tail, the edges. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Mark.
Thanks. I'll take that. Yeah. Okay. Did it work when we tested it?
Did you?
Yeah.
Should be on.
Try that one.
Hold on.
Did it work when we tested it?
Sorry. Can you do it without slides?
Yeah, I can.
We're gonna go without slides.
Sure. Okay, hi. My name is Mark Ram. I manage the Wayback Machine at the Internet Archive in San Francisco. Thank you. I want to show you a picture of our building, but you have to imagine it. Big white building with pillars in front. You're all invited. We have an open lunch every Friday. Many of you I've seen at the archive, but you're all invited. Just come and talk to me about that. We're probably most well known for the Wayback Machine, but we do a lot more than that. And we work in books and music and software, etc. I'd like to show you a picture of our book scanning device. We have book scanning operations in 29 locations around the world. We scan more than 1,000 books a day. After we finish scanning the books, we put them in shipping containers. We've got mounds of shipping containers in a warehouse over in Richmond. We take long-term preservation very seriously. We have more than 25 million book edition records in the Open Library, more than 8 million ebooks and full texts available online, more than 250,000 of which are lendable. And of course, everything that we do and offer is free. And I should note that our mission statement is universal access to all knowledge, which resonates pretty well with this particular conference. We have more than 100,000 software titles online with emulation, Apple IICs, Commodore, Atari, etc. We also have more than 1 million hours of television news that we've been archiving for the last 8 or 9 years. And that's full text index with closed caption.
For the last 4 years, we've been archiving outlinks to all edits and changes and additions to Wikipedia, and that helps power a service that we've been running with a couple of volunteers, Maximilian Dorr and Stephen Balbach, who created the IA bot and also the Wayback Meta robots. And right now, there's more than 1 million links on Wikipedia that have been edited to point to archived versions of those pages on the Wayback Machine. We've gone through Wikipedia English. We're working on Sweden right now. We've lined up 10 more countries to work on. I would like to accelerate this process. One of the reasons I'm here is to forward that goal. So if any of you can help me work with other language Wikipedias, I would like to do that. 2 other things here. Right. So in addition, one of my goals is to increase the number of objects on the Internet Archive that are cited in Wikipedia articles. So in the Etherpad, there's a link to a Google Doc, and it's got some URLs in it for books, for example, for television news, for web archives, and also the associated API interfaces for them, such that, for example, if you enter in a book URL from Open Library, we can return back to you metadata about that book that can be used to construct a citation. So tomorrow, I would welcome an opportunity to work with anyone who wants to help to bridge the gap, the interface between Citoid and various resources from the Internet Archive. I'm also interested in automatically running through Wikipedia for things like book titles and turning them into citations as well. And I'm not talking about just citations to metadata about these resources, but in many cases I'm talking about being able to pull up the actual full text of the book online in a book reader. And there's one other thing. I got a request recently to start backing up Wiki Data. So we'll follow the IRC channel for Wiki Data the same way we do for the various Wikipedias, and we'll back up all of that material in near real time as well. And just generally speaking, I'm looking for opportunities to increase the use of the Internet Archive, and in particular, make it of greater value to Wikipedia writ large. So if anyone has any ideas about any aspect of that, please come speak to me. And if ever you're wondering, hey, I see something on the web, I want to back it up now, we have extensions for Safari and Chrome and Firefox. We've got an iOS app and an Android app. And on web.archive.org, there's a little link that says Save Page Now. Just drop a URL in there, press a button, and we'll back it up. People do that 20 times a second. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Next up, Catherine Thornton and Andra.
Yay.
Okay, this is work that I did in partnership with Andra. This is work that I did in partnership with Andra. Andra and I are participating in the Shape Expressions community group. Shape Expressions is a language to validate a subset of an RDF graph. And the way that we see potential for interacting with Wikidata is specifying a set of properties, qualifiers, and references that have to do with some topic that you would like to know if a particular set of Wikidata items are in conformance with or not. So I'm going to give you a quick demo of how you can validate a shape expression. This is a shape expression that Andra wrote related to cancer. In this panel, you can see a definition of the shape itself, including the properties and what we expect the reference to look like. Over here, you can just hit load to load in the set of items that you would like to consider. And then you can hit validate. And over here, you can see the result. The green are links to items that are in conformance with this shape, and the red are links to items that fail the conformance test with this shape. Andra and I started a set of stubbed shape expressions that you can find in this GitHub repo. Andra posted them on the Lightning Talk page. And we started these as a basis for further discussion. We'll be talking about them tomorrow during the hack day and extending them. This is just a first pass. They're not complete yet. We welcome input from anybody who's interested. And if you'd like to take a look at the specification for shape expressions, and there's also a primer that has been developed so that you can learn more about shape expressions if you're interested. Andra put those links in the Lightning Talk page as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next up is Amon.
Okay, so what I'm going to talk about, if you look at the Etherpad, there's two links. One is under my little talk. There's a link to a technical abstract, and there's a link to a Wikipedia research page. If you look at the technical abstract, that's the thing I'm going to walk through right now. Okay, so basically what we want to understand is the extent to which groups of editors on an individual page are biased in a kind of conservative or in a liberal direction, and if the composition of that team is relatively neutral, which is to say, for every heavily biased person on the right, there's a heavily biased person on the left, or if everybody is sort of like in the middle from the beginning. There's a really big literature on the sort of deleterious effects of heavy diversity on the consumption of knowledge. So basically, like, communities form, cliques form, social networks are sort of built around those, and then people get into these echo chambers. There's also a smaller and kind of anemic literature on the positive effects of diversity when it comes to teams, and I say it's anemic because it really only focuses on gender and ethnic and socioeconomic, but it doesn't focus at all on opinions, which drive a lot of now granted the former kind of shape the latter, but so what we wanted to do was we wanted to see how politically diverse teams perform, and so what we did is we found every editor on Wikipedia, we tracked every edit they ever made, and we every edit they ever made to every page on Wikipedia. And we tried to basically predict or infer their political alignment based on a probability distribution over the pages they edit, which would predict the next page that they would edit would be a conservative page. The way we did that was we went to American conservatism and we found every page underneath it, and we just sort of tallied up all the edits. There's an actual technical description right here of how we model that explicitly. And what we find is that basically, as the number of editors of a page increases, thanks. I'll just yell. I hate these things. As the number of editors per page increases, what you see is the political alignment becomes neutral. Okay? What you see for the alignment of individual editors is this really heavy-tailed thing, which means that there's lots of sort of liberal editors, there's lots of conservative editors, and there's quite a few neutral editors. But for any given page on Wikipedia, the more editors you have, the more neutral the page becomes. moreover, what we find is the quality of the page increases the more variance there is in the editors, which is to say, you need to have lots of really conservative and lots of really liberal editors contributing to the same page to increase the quality. So these are the actual quality scores that Wikipedia has. We use, I think Aaron invented the classifier. So we use the classifier on all these pages, and then we just took the alignments of the editors and the variance. We find that quality goes up when the variance goes up. Okay. Crude measure, because we don't, how do we know that we're actually capturing people's biases? This brings me to the second part, and this is the thing that I need your feedback on. So what we're going to do is to validate the measure, we're going to do a survey. And so we're trying to dot our I's and cross our T's. We've created a research Wikipedia and politics page. I really would, I'm not like a heavy user of Wikipedia, so I would really appreciate the feedback. I want to make sure that I don't piss off the community. I want to make sure that I don't do something that's weird. I think I'm out of time.
No, you have 1 minute left.
Okay, I have 1 minute left. So if you could just take a look at this, tell me if this is scary. Tell me if this spooks you. Basically, I'm going to go to editors' talk pages, and I'm going to invite them to take a survey, and I'm going to ask them about their political alignment. So I want to do that in a way that is kosher. So could you please look at this, talk to me, throw things in the discussion tab, and make sure that I don't goof this up. Thanks.
Is there time for a question?
Sure, one question.
If I'm understanding you correctly, you look at what they edited and you decide like if they edit conservative articles that are conservative. But in my experience, many political editors like to edit articles of their political antagonists.
Mm-hmm.
So how does your formula account for that?
Yeah. So basically what it says is, here are all the pages you edit, and you spend an awful lot of time on these American conservatism pages. And then it just makes this assumption that you're interested in conservatism, which means that you bring a potential bias to any edit that is trending toward conservatism. It doesn't mean you're a conservative, but it might. And so that's why I want to validate it with this survey. Yeah.
Can you please add references to that page?
Yeah. Like what?
There is a reference section which is empty, which is bad for Wikicite.
How many would you like me to put on there?
For instance, the one that you were just giving the talk from.
Sure.
Why is that a Google Doc? Should be somewhere public and cited.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Next up is TPT.
Okay, because I don't have any HTML adapter, so I do not have any HTML adapter. So oh yeah, it's working.
Great.
So hello, I am Thomas. I am a volunteer Wikisource contributor. So I'm gonna talk about Wikisource and more especially about metadata on Wikisource. So what is Wikisource? Wikisource is Wikipedia sister projects that provides basically a library of open text. So there are some digital native text and also books that are proofread by contributors and moved to Wikitext to make them searchable, editable, and shareable by anyone. So the Wikisource is currently growing. We have something like more than 1,000 pages that are actually proofread every day. If I have a look quickly at the English Wikisource, you see that you have a main page that displays your text. So here is a text. You could read it. And if you want to edit something, so you could click edit here, but sorry, it's not let's go back to this, and you could go to edit one specific page and check that the proofreading is good. And if you're not happy with it, you could just edit this specific this specific page, and you have also another space that is called index, that is about metadata, about the proofreading. So you have it's connected to a file on Wikimedia Commons, and it provides you a table of content, the mapping between pages on the file and pages on the books. But all of that is encoded in Wikitext. So one goal is to map it to Wiki Data in order to be able to share all the metadata about things that are in Wikisource, to be able, for example, to cite when you want to cite a work and it is on Wikisource, you want to be able to retrieve very easily that the link to Wikisource. So, for example, in order to in Wiki Data, in Wikipedia, be able when you cite a text and it is on Wikisource to just create automatically the link to Wikisource. For that, you have to Wikisource maps very easily to FRBR. So basically, the main namespace is about editions. We have also disambiguation pages that maps very well to work pages, and so to Wikipedia articles. And we have also the index space that is maps very easily to manifestations and files on Wikimedia Commons. So how to do the actual conversion to Wikidata. So our idea is to map all Wikisource templates to schema.org, because templates are different in every Wikisource, and inside of Wikisource, and different templates are used to encode metadata. So when you have mapped all these templates to schema.org, you're able to build bots and tools that retrieve this data from all templates on all Wikisource, to be able to build lists, to upload things on Wikidata. So we have currently this kind of things, but the current limitation before doing massive import on Wikidata is that the data model on Wikidata is still unclear, especially for types. Which types you should use for works, for editions, what about translations, and so on. So to finish, just an example of what we are able to extract for templates.
1 minute.
Thank you. So from this simple template, we retrieve also the data from the index page to retrieve the name of the work, the publication date, place, information about the author, links to Wikisource author pages, and that allows us to then retrieve the Wikidata item about the author and do all automated alignments. So thank you.
Great, thank you. TPT has another lightning talk next.
We already have talked about it during the wrap-up sections. It was just a simple demo of a template, so
Great. Thank you. So next up is Antonin.
So that's more of a lightning demo than a lightning talk, really. I'm here to talk to you about OpenRefine. It's essentially a spreadsheet software that was developed by Freebase to ingest any sort of data set into a knowledge base. And it was abandoned by Google when Freebase was depreciated. And it's been made open source, so now I've been trying to migrate this to Wikidata because it's a really useful software to have. So it accepts a wide range of input formats. It's very convenient to use, even if the data is noisy. It accepts very messy data sets. And it creates what they call projects, which are just tables like this. So this is a data set of scholarly institutions that I want to add to Wikidata. And of course, before that, I need to do some cleanup on the data set to make sure, for instance, that the identifiers are represented in the same format as what we have in Wikidata. I might want to filter out some rows that aren't really like institutions that we want to have. So it's all done very conveniently by a system of facets. So for instance, if I go and see the country code, I can do a text facet in that, and as you can expect, you get something like this. You can filter out by like Austrian institutions, for instance. And then the main problem you have when you want to pull all this data into Wikidata is first to align each row with the Wikidata item that represents it, if it already exists. So they call that reconciliation, and they have like built-in capabilities to do that. So the way it works is you pick the column that represents the name of the item you want to reconcile, and you click this. You can choose endpoints to reconcile, not just Wikidata, but any other database that supports the API. And then you're given a dialog which proposes first to choose a type of the items that you're looking at. So these types were guessed automatically by the software by trying to reconcile the first rows. Most of the time it's a bit too specific, so you can also specify your own time. So I can just say I want an organization. And then the interesting thing about the software is that you can also take into account the other columns you have to refine the reconciliation score of each item. So instead of just doing a basic string search on the name, you can say, oh, I have a grid ID in this table. I can actually include that and match that to a property, which is called grid ID. I also have this external ID, which I know is an ISNI, and so on. So that's for IDs. You can also include text-based properties. It's going to do a string like just edit distance on these strings. If you have properties that don't really correspond to properties on your items, but rather have to be fetched by a Spark called property paths, it's also supported. So for the country code, for instance, if you just pick country, this is going to lead you to the item of the country, not the country code. So you can add a slash and add the ISO code property for that. And then you click reconcile. It takes a while, of course. So I'm going to use something that I've done before, which is I've reconciled that before for you and used the edit history to roll back before the state. Okay. So once it's reconciled, it looks like this. You have links. Oops, sorry. You have links on each item. So that's when the reconciliation succeeded, because it was unambiguous enough. You also have sometimes ambiguous items that you can reconcile manually, a bit like in mix and match. So you can filter out the ones that were matched and only see the unmatched one. And for instance, in this one, we have two suggestions. We can inspect them and see which one the dataset meant, and then match that. And you have plenty of other ways to make the process more efficient. You can say, okay, maybe the ones with a matching score above that threshold, I trust them, I want to match them automatically. You can also fetch other columns from the reconciled item. So you can say, I want to add a new column to my dataset based on this property or this property path, if you want. And the goal is to migrate also the editing capabilities of this software to make it able to push data to Wikidata. That's it.
Great, thank you. We have time for one more. Next is Finn.
So I would like to go very long time back in Wiki Data times. more than 1 year, approximately 1.5 years, to a project I made at that point. It was a challenge by the Danish library system, trying to make a new interface to books. And what I did was to use Wikidata's, the Wikidata as a backend to a system where I displayed places of actions in literary works, mostly fiction works. Here you have an example of Copenhagen. Might be able to see. This is supposed to be Copenhagen, and each of these dots here is an item fed from Wikidata, and where there's been indicated a place of action. So we can go down in a specific place here with a church. I believe it's this one here. This is a citation yet again fed from Wikidata about in this case it's a book by Jules Verne that took place part of the action took place in Copenhagen. So this part here is fetched over from this particular item here, a journey to the center of the earth, and down here we have the particular place of action, which is this particular church, and a citation here, which is fed over to this one here. So this also means that you can, for example, search on nearby works if you just have a coordinate and place your browser in the middle of that. Okay.
Great, thank you very much. So let's give a big round of applause for everyone who gave a lightning talk. So the suggestion has been made. We have 10 lightning talks left. We have another lightning talk session tomorrow. If you're one of those 10 people, the suggestion has been made that we change the program and move the lightning talk earlier in the day. We still need to coordinate with the program tomorrow and the two program chairs to make sure that's going to work. But if you're one of those 10 people and have a lightning talk scheduled for tomorrow, please be ready to do it early in the day, just in case. The suggestion was made because some of that content might help fuel what people want to hack on. So thank you, and then I'm going to turn it over for Dario for some final thoughts and wrap up before dinner.
How early?
4 a.m.
So we're starting tomorrow at 8:30 again.
Lightning talks at 8:30.
Be ready to do them then, yes.
All right. It's a wrap. Thank you. I don't have any final thoughts. I think it was a great day. I have to say maybe a few share a few words about how nervous we were this morning about the entire process, because we basically took a bottom-up approach to figuring out what you all wanted to work on, and it's like try and fit and map these ideas against a grid that would somehow make sense. And I was really impressed at how we managed to have like really engaged discussions and plenty of useful thoughts about where we're going. So thanks for that. As a reminder, so tomorrow, this is basically the end of our more formal part in the event. As of tomorrow, you can basically go wild. You can go wild and start hacking without any specific agenda. And so we're looking forward to what we'll be creating tomorrow out of all of these brilliant ideas. Thanks a lot. And dinner, one more thing. Oh, one more thing. Group photo.
Don't forget, tomorrow we're going to be doing a group photo. Make sure you look on the schedule. We've put it on the schedule, but the schedule might be moving around tonight. It'll be accurate on Meta at the end of the day. But we definitely are going to do a group photo, so don't miss it.
Thank you.
Lastly, if you're planning to download large data sets, try and do it overnight. If you have large data sets, I have a 3 terabyte drive.
I have storage.
Yay.
Also, this actually works with your browser rather than your computer, right? Usually it's this is just a go-to video. It's the video right? And of course,
Are you gonna make a new one? The visual editors, that's a long way now.
what else is done? Not always. So you know we can do because like content editing
Ether pads, man.
So now you can switch like
the whole thing work. Running sessions and stuff. Like they didn't give us even they give us whiteboard. And I said Ether pads like based stuff. And an event anyways. Ether pads.
Sorry, do you want Well, I have two problems. This could go on for a while. Do you have
The sessions were really productive. I mean, I feel a little overworked. Because, I mean, we'll see. How about you? How you feeling?
I'm good.
Were you at that? What did you work on? That's a hack, I guess.
No, actually, I had a bunch of interactions
Gotcha. You should go in the city. That's not yours, right?
Thanks for being with the
No, no problem. So Jimmy just popped in for an hour?
Yeah. Sit around for
I didn't know if he was in Vienna for Wiki Tribune or whatever, right?
Otherwise, try Aaron. And if he can't help, try.
I think he probably got a pretty good show. I mean, the summaries went pretty well, actually.
Yeah.
And if he can't help, try.
Technical, fast,
I felt more engaged during the session summaries because it felt a lot more immediate. There was more call to action. Whereas, like, basically during the previous thing, the talks, right? It was like, here's what we did over the last year. You know? Yeah, you guys get your work done and stuff.
Mahmoud.
The Germans are really relaxed about things. Hang out
Well, all right.
Well, if someone literally URL from
I will find for you because like I fix the signal. It takes as much time as Aaron, he can do it. Great.
Şu bakıyor da
Evet.
Ale So I think we will always need this. Yeah, there's these people
I have an example.
What about thought of
The photo shooting is important, you see.
No, go on. It's fine.
Training for tomorrow.
Yeah. I have to practice.
Don't you want to have a...
There's a game we can shoot.
Really?
Did you shoot Wikipedia?
They can use the API.
Yeah, I heard about that. And they wrote one API or something like that.
Yeah, you usually have on your own ground
First of all, I guess I'm
now you need to
so users get a
stay here. All those things are good.
But they have Wikipedia articles, but they don't have.
They have at least a Wiki Data item. Wiki Data is not Wikipedia. I don't know what this doesn't distinguish. Wiki should be as a guide.
This is actually a nice display. This is this describes excruciating
It's in the
and then after that,
you need a label that
where to plug them into the
because okay, I have a better idea.
Yes. It's because it's actually shared between all the CS1
So citations. What about?
So that's that one. I'm going to try that.
Because So what about So what about
نه دوست ببین اون اینجوری کار کرد ولی
به خاطر همین باز است
The different mechanisms they are based on this different translation. How can I cite the hero of the organization and then kind of
چند میفروشه
نسبت وقتی من دنبال خوب بودیم زندگی نه از اون که
زندگی ویکی‌پدیا نه الان بهتره
ببین دنیا رو که طلاق میدی یه مرسی
here it is
چیزی من گرفتی از دستم من اینو تازه گم کردم پیداش کردم این خیلی داغونه ولی شو سالا
because that was because like whatever. And it's so into maybe a hack is
So is that done?
not to actually so there's two ways.
I mean,
one is to like figure out
it should work. Let's say
the second is
it works. I mean, it can be that some cases or it can be that it could actually do better, or you change the interface the visual things and then the translator goes or something like that.
So my problem is in the basic form it's extraordinarily unclear.
So where it says things that you bar, have the ability to say write your reference here, write your reference here inside the template here.
Paste your reference.
Paste it right. Yes. Here. Absolutely. Screw that.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's just do it.
Let's just do it.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, the way that we did the original was because we source for
So this one, I don't think this one is.
And then for those articles,
this is one. But the URL, this is the okay. And so what's what so I'm reading the book, so I'm starting with page, and this is page 173. Yeah. I'm not sure how to talk about
community tab.
So in this case, I don't think we have a...
Because I find
but I think maybe it's time to do another match. It depends a lot on how they records data.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Because